All right, great. Thank you everybody for attending tonight. What we're going to do is we're going to go over the neighborhood council election for Region 9. So I really appreciate everyone's participation. I just wanted to highlight a few different people. So my name is Michael Lectrich. I'm with the City Clerk's office um, under neighborhood council elections. I also have Paola here with me. She's one of our election administrators. So I'm sure many of you have worked with Paola, and she will be on the chat tonight. So if people have questions, she will be answering those. But we will have a question and answer period later. So if there's any that we don't get to, we'll make sure to cover that. I want to try to cover everybody's questions. And then we also have Mary Lou with the Empower LA. She's going to go over the outreach for neighborhood council elections. So what I will do is you're going to hear from me for a long period of time. Sorry about that. And then I'll hand it off to Mary Lou so she can go over the outreach for neighborhood council elections. And then we can open it up and have a good amount of time just to go over any questions that come up. So we're happy that you're here, and we just want to talk it through and let you all know that we are here to assist you through this election season. So with that, we'll get started. So I just want to go over the meeting agenda just so we know kind of what the plan is. So first, we're going to talk about election documents, kind of like the documents we use to come up with the blueprint for every neighborhood council's election. We'll go over the candidate filing process. Then we'll go over the all vote by mail election process. So just so everybody's aware, this election season is for neighborhood councils is all vote by mail. So I just want to break down how that's going to work and some different things that every neighborhood council can do. Then we'll talk a little bit about election resources. I'll hand it off to Mayor Lou, and then we can go over any questions. So with that, we'll get started. What I wanted to highlight when we talk about neighborhood council bylaws is I wanted to show how we take the bylaws and we use that to create a blueprint for each neighborhood council that's unique to that neighborhood council for their election. So what we use when we develop the election is we look at Article 3, which discusses the boundaries. That's including any internal boundaries or shared facilities with other neighborhood councils. We take a look at Article 4, which goes over the stakeholder types, which I'll go over in the next slide. We go over Article 5, which breaks down the governing board, and that includes if there's term limits, if there's staggered seating, it often shows the establishment of staggered seating in that area. And if there's any kind of sometimes special situations for the board, it's often covered in that area. Article 10 is the article that goes over the elections. So this is everything from the voter verification type, if there's restrictions on how many seats a candidate can run for. There's a few neighborhood councils where candidates might be able to run for multiple seats. It also might have any additional information about the voting model that neighborhood council might have. We also review attachment A, which is the neighborhood council map. And then lastly, we review attachment B, which outlines the governing board structure and voting model. And so what that does is it breaks down every seat. It has the term for that seat, how that person is selected. So if they're selected, appointed, or elected, it has the requirements to be eligible to be a candidate, and then also the voter eligibility. So we take all of that information, including the stakeholder types. And when we talk about stakeholder types, there's 4 different types that I just wanted to highlight briefly. So the first one is live, the most common. So that's any stakeholder who resides within neighborhood council boundaries. 2, there's work. So that's a stakeholder who provides services within the neighborhood council boundaries. Then there's own property. So one thing to kind of highlight with own property is when we talk about own property, it has to be real property. Um, so like owning a business would fall under work, but owning real property, such as a house or a business, has to be the actual property. And then fourth category is community interest. This one, the definition is defined as a person who participates in a nonprofit organization that has continuously maintained a physical street address for not less than 1 year, and that performs ongoing verifiable activities and operations that benefit the neighborhood council. So when it comes to community interest, there's really two areas that we want to highlight. One, that the organization that the stakeholder participates in must be a nonprofit organization, and it must have a physical street address for at least 1 year. So just want to kind of highlight that. So we take the bylaws, including the stakeholder types, and we develop a ballot voting model. Every board in Region 9 should have received their ballot voting models. So I just wanted to kind of briefly go over it. So to kind of clarify what it is that you're looking at when we're talking about ballot voting models. So first we'll have the NC name, including the abbreviation. And we highlight this just because this is specifically what is going to be on all election materials. So everything, including the ballots and any like certification lists, will have this name on that report or the ballots, along with this abbreviation. Then the information here is going to show how many ballot types there are. So based off the different stakeholder types, there may be a ballot type for each stakeholder type. If there's internal boundaries, there might be a ballot for each internal boundary. Under that, there's ballots issued. So this is going to show if in that neighborhood council, how many ballots each stakeholder can receive. So here there's 9 ballot types in this neighborhood council and only 1 ballot issued per stakeholder. However, there's some neighborhood councils where there might be 9 ballot types and maybe a stakeholder can receive up to 9 ballots based off their stakeholder status. So that's kind of highlighted here. Next, we have board seats. So we show how many board seats there are in total and how many are up for election this season. The term for those seats, the voting age, the stakeholder verification. So that's either going to be self-affirmation or documentation. I'll break down the differences between the two a little bit later. Candidate restrictions. So this is going to, most common is candidates can run for no more than 1 board seat. However, there's some neighborhood councils where that's not the case. There might be any additional language. Again, that's going to be pulled from your bylaws. Under other election related language is going to be language that we pull from the bylaws. Most common is going to be if there's any shared facilities, we're going to list them here just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. You know, for example, here, Venice High is a shared property between Mar Vista and Venice Neighborhood Council. So that's why we have it listed here. And then lastly, in this information section, we just have the vote by mail period. Then underneath that, we have a breakdown of each ballot. So you'll see the name for that ballot. So here it's going to be Zone 1 ballot, along with the eligibility to receive that ballot. Again, this is always pulled from the bylaws. And then it will list every seat that's on that ballot, along with the number of seats. You know, for example, there's only one Zone 1 director, but there's multiple at-large directors, so those seats would be on this ballot. And it just goes down. So here there would be 9 different ballots broken down on your ballot voting model. So everyone who's a board member should have received their ballot voting model. If you haven't, feel free to put in the chat and we'll make sure that we get that out to you. So now that we've kind of talked about how we take all of that documentation and create the blueprint for for each neighborhood council election, I wanted to talk about the candidate filing process. When it comes to the candidate filing process for Region 9, that's going to open on November 29th, and it will end on January 13th, 2025. So the candidate filing period is open for 45 calendar days. When we talk about applying to be a candidate, there's 2 main ways that candidates can apply. One is going to be through the neighborhood council portal, which is available in English and Spanish, or there are paper applications. These paper applications can easily be filled out. From our website, we have PDF fillable forms that can be emailed to us, or they can also just be printed out, filled out, and sent into our office. We do have translations available for our candidate filing application in up to 13 languages. When we talk about candidate filing, all candidates are required to provide documentation proving stakeholder status. So what we're looking for are 3. We want a documentation that covers these 3 areas, which is going to be a photo ID, proof of age, and proof of stakeholder status. Because all of that is part of the requirement to be a candidate, is the proof of age and proof of stakeholder status. The photo ID is proving that that person is who they say they are. So the most common is going to be a driver's license, can cover all 3 of these if it's valid and the address is within the boundaries. However, the required documentation might be a little bit different based off the seat requirements. For example, let's say that it's someone who works in the neighborhood council. They might have to pair maybe they pair a California ID with some other sort of documentation as a pay stub to prove that they work within the neighborhood council. So our office, once we receive those applications and we review the documentation, we will certify a candidate. Once we certify a candidate, that documentation is destroyed. We don't have records of it anymore. We have records of our notes so that we can refer to that, but we don't want to keep anyone's private information anymore. So once someone is certified, that documentation is gone. So after someone's certified, there is a candidate challenge period that's open during the full candidate filing period with some additional days. And only certified candidates can be challenged. We do that because if someone's submitted an application, but they haven't provided documentation proving stakeholder status, we don't want to challenge them already because technically they haven't proven that they are qualified for that seat. So we would wait until our office has reviewed documentation and has certified them, and then there can be a challenge. And there's a form on our website to fill out that's pretty simple for that. The certified list of candidates will be released to the public 60 days prior to election day. We also will release contact information 60 days prior to election day to neighborhood council boards so that they can reach out to candidates should they have a candidate forum or some sort of event where they want the candidates to participate or want to provide information about the neighborhood council. So next, I'm going to go over the candidate filing paper application and the portal. So just bear with me a quick second while I change screens. All right. So this is our candidate filing paper application. So I have one filled out so we can kind of just go through it. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is the form that we have available in multiple different languages on our website. So we have a brief opening about the application deadline, things of that nature. And then we have the neighborhood council information. So the stakeholder can put in which neighborhood council they want to run for and the seat that they would like to run for. Next is the candidates information for themselves. So first would be their name on the ballot. One thing to highlight when we talk about name on the ballot, so that name could be the name that they are known for in the neighborhood. It does not have to be their legal name. For example, here, the first name is Victor, while their first name listed here is Theo. So maybe Theo is their legal name, but they go by Victor because that's their middle name, or it could be multiple reasons. But the name on the ballot is what they are known by in the community. There's the option to include pronouns. The pronouns are kept on the candidate website. It doesn't show up on the ballot or anything like that. It's just on the candidate website and it's optional. They can include their birth year. The only time that we may need to contact a candidate is if it's a U seat, because that has to be between 14 to 17. We might have to reach out to make sure that they are the proper age at the time of the election. Then phone number and email address. These are optional fields, but highly recommend them because if there's any issues with the application, we'll be able to reach out to the stakeholder. We often receive paper applications that are not filled out completely. So that information is really vital so that we can reach out to those candidates to get that information so that we can make sure that we can get them certified. Then there's just the question, if they are a current board member in the neighborhood council, they can say yes or no. And then there's the option to initial if they agree to receive neighborhood council information from Empower LA via text. So that's the candidate information. Next is the qualifying address area. So we have this broken down into the 4 different stakeholder types: live, work, own, and community interest. We always say qualifying address, complete all that apply. The reason for that is because based off the candidate requirements, they might need to provide multiple addresses or provide multiple pieces of information. We've also seen it where someone might not, maybe they put work and that work address is not within the neighborhood council, but their live address is within the neighborhood council. So we'll be able to kind of look up both of those, see how we can work with the candidate to make sure that they qualify and can be certified on the ballot. So this example, this candidate works, so they put their organization name, the street address, and then they put that they are an employee. The reason for those boxes is because sometimes that will give us a little bit more information. So sometimes an NC might have an employee seat versus a business owner seat. Then there's an area where they can list if they provided any documentation with their application. So for example, this candidate put a driver's license and a pay stub since they work, so they have to pair those two things. So like we'd use the driver's license to provide proof of age and photo ID, and then the pay stub is something dated to show that they do currently work within the neighborhood council. And then they sign and date under penalty of perjury. The second page provides information for the candidate statement. So they can write any sort of candidate statement. When it comes to the candidate statement, candidate statements must not exceed 1,000 characters. And so that's including punctuation, spacing, all of that. So it has to be under 1,000 characters. And so that's the paper application. It's pretty simple. I want to go through the portal as well, just so everybody knows what that looks like. So we have the neighborhood council filing portal. If no one, like if someone's brand new and they're coming into the portal, they can click need an account register here. And all they do is they type in their first name, last name, email, they confirm their email and hit create. Once they hit create, they'll receive an email to confirm their email address. And there will be a link provided that will take them to create a password. And once that password is created, they can simply type in their email here and their password and log in. Also, there's forgot your password option. So if you click on that, you can just type in your email and a link will be sent to your email with a link to create a new password. Excuse me. So I've created an email, have a password, I can click login. So the candidate and voter portal is going to be the same. So that login is going to be the same for both voter and candidate. So here, I'm going to make sure that I'm clicked on candidate, and then you can click create candidate application. So this will start a application. We have the candidate application through the portal broken down into 5 different steps. So the first step is going to be the neighborhood council information. What they do is you will select from the dropdown. From the dropdown, it's only going to show neighborhood councils that are currently open with candidate filing. This is a test portal, so that's why I have some Region 9s in here, even though it's not open yet. So let's see, I'll choose EC Southwest. Once I choose that neighborhood council, I scroll down here and I'm going to see all of the seats that are up for election. So I'll choose at-large representative. Once I choose that seat name, the seat requirements will pop up here. This information is pulled from the bylaws and it will stay up there through the process, just so it can be referenced at any time during the application. Next, you choose the stakeholder type. So it's community interest, live, own property, or work. So I'll just choose live. And then there's the selection of if they are a current board member in this neighborhood council. So I'll just hit no and go on to next. So that's all it is for step 1. Step 2 is going to be the candidate information. So its name as it will appear on the ballot. So let me type in name there. You have the option for pronouns. And then the first name and last name is going to be pulled from that registration, but it is completely editable. So like, for example, it's pulling Michael Eckrich because that's the name I provided when I created this account, but I can edit my name, both first name and last name. Also, the email is pulled from the registration email that I used to create this account, but at the same time, it is editable, so it can be changed. Maybe I want to use one email to create this account, but there's actually a candidate email that I'd rather receive any candidate related emails with, and that can be updated here. Next, you can include date of birth. One thing I do want to note, I know a lot of people can be sensitive about including their full date of birth. And so as long as it's not that period that I was kind of talking about, usually the use seat, where we have to make sure by their date of birth that they're within that age range. you can put, let's take myself. I'm much older than 17, and I'm just running for this seat, which is 18 years or older. So I can put 0101 and then maybe put in the year I was born. And that's fine, because all we're really focused on is the year. Then there's the option to, like I mentioned, there's the email here. You can also include a phone number. You can decline to state phone number, but as I mentioned, it's always great to provide that contact information in case we have any questions and want to reach out to the candidate about their application. Lastly, in this area, they can click to agree to receive neighborhood council information from Empower LA via text. It's optional, so if you leave it unchecked, that's fine. So then you can go to next. So I've gone through the first two steps. This last step is going to be qualifying address. When we talk about qualifying address, that's whatever address is tied to their stakeholder status. So if they live, it's where they live. If they work, it's their work address. If they're a community interest stakeholder because they go attend a church, this would be the church address. So let me just type in an address. So you can type in address, state, and then include the zip code. Once the address is typed in, they can click verify qualifying address, just to verify that the address provided falls within the boundaries. So as you can see here, there's a little green triangle. So I zoom out a little bit. You can see the neighborhood council is highlighted in green, and you can see the internal boundaries as well. And it states down here, addresses within the boundaries. If this was let's say it's an area 3 seat, only area 3 would be highlighted, and it's checking to make sure that that area tied to that seat is within the boundaries. Let's say that a stakeholder is across the street, and there will be a message down here to say unable to verify address. It does not stop the candidate from submitting their application. They'll still be able to submit it, and we'll just take a closer look on our end. Maybe there's a typo in the address, or maybe there's something with the address. So we'll just take a closer look at that, and then we can reach out to the candidate if there's any issues. So you can hit close. Then there's the option for a mailing address. You put same as qualifying, different from qualifying, and then enter it, or just decline to state. And then I'm going to hit next. One thing I want to highlight when it comes to candidate filing is there's two deadlines with candidate filing. The first deadline is submitting your application. So when I hit next, I'm going to have two prompts. And once I agree to those prompts, that application has been submitted. So for the candidate filing deadline, the candidate filing deadline only requires that an application submitted. 3 days after the submission, the candidate filing deadline, we have a documentation deadline. And so what that means is we have 3 additional days to work with that candidate to hopefully get their documentation so that we're able to certify them. So what you do is you hit next, and it's a penalty of perjury, and it comes with a little statement to mention that documentation is required and that it must be submitted by the deadline. You can hit accept and then submit. Next is the neighborhood council board member candidate for election board service acknowledgement and affirmation. This is a very knowledgeable document that goes over neighborhood council board members, a lot of information about what neighborhood councils do, and it's really a good document to refer to. We do have it on our site, so don't worry that you have to read it all right now. It's part of the handbook. It's on our site as well. So it can be reviewed at any time. So you scroll down, you accept that and click submit. So now the application is considered submitted. So that everything up to that point has to be completed by the candidate filing deadline. And then now step 4 is where the candidate can upload documentation, which has to be submitted by the documentation deadline. So for this example, candidates can, if there's any questions about what kind of documentation they can use, they can click here and it will go through our documentation guide. This is a really good document that breaks down multiple different stakeholder types. So let's click here. So this, for example, it's if you live in the NC as a homeowner or resident, it gives examples for proof of home ownership, examples of photo ID, and proof of age. These are not the only documents we'll accept, but it's a good idea of a lot of the frequent documents that we receive. And so to upload a document, it will always be proof of ID and proof of live, because I chose live with this application. If I choose work, it would say proof of work. So it's just to kind of remind people what kind of documentation we're using. Because this is live, I can just put a driver's license and that will cover all bases and we can accept that. And so once we see that, we'll be able to see they don't have to upload their documentation twice. We'll just review that driver's license to see that that meets the stakeholder requirements. So once you click next, we will be notified that there's documentation attached to that application. So we'll review that. And then lastly, step 5 is the candidate photo and statement area. So this is optional and can be updated at a later time. It does not have to all be included at the time of filing. It can be done multiple times between the time that they file to 35 days prior to election day. So you can upload a photo. So you can click select file. So I can choose a file and you can kind of edit it because we have a standard size for all candidate photos. And so you can kind of, let's say that you want to zoom in a little bit more. You can kind of edit it a little bit. You get to preview down here. If you're okay with that, you hit use this image. And then there's the option to include a candidate statement. So you can include you can type in a candidate statement there. And as you can see down here, a benefit of using the portal is it's already telling me how many characters I'm using of the 1,000 that I'm allotted. And you can hit save. Once you hit save, it won't immediately go on the candidate website. All candidate photos and statements have to be reviewed by our office before they go up. The only reason that we're doing that is because we've had it multiple times prior to that and even through this process where people will accidentally upload, their driver's license or any sort of sensitive materials that they did not mean to make their candidate photo. And then now it's just open to the public. So we just review that to make sure that they're not posting, maybe a deed to a house. We've seen it before, so we don't want that. But the candidate can click save. And then what you can see, every time that someone submits an application, they have what we're called a candidate tile. So I have quite a few here because it's a test application, but what would be here is the ballot name, the NC for that application, the race, the stakeholder type, and then the status for the application. So a great thing of going through the portal is you can log in at any point and you can check the status of that application. So for this, I see that it's certified. I see the filing date, deadline dates, and then there's a button. So like, let's say that I have a candidate photo and statement up, but I realize I want to change it a little bit. You can always go in, as long as it's prior to the deadline, to edit it. There is the option to withdraw. So as you can see here on the right, this is an example of an application where I've withdrawn. One thing to note is if the NC has a requirement where candidates can only run for one seat, if you want to run for a different seat, you can withdraw your application and then you would be able to submit another application. You won't be able to submit multiple applications for that NC. You can only submit one. If you want to change a seat, you can either do it that way where you withdraw and submit another application, or you can always call our office and we can help you through that process as well. So that's the candidate filing section. Hold on just a second while I go back to the presentation. So we went through the paper application, went through the portal. Now I want to talk about the all vote by mail registration process. As I mentioned, the city clerk's office was only funded to provide all vote by mail election model for the 2025 neighborhood council elections. So for Region 9, the vote by mail application period is going to be from January 31st through March 23rd, 2025. So I'll break down kind of the steps here. The first step is going to be a vote by mail application is submitted. I want to highlight when it comes to neighborhood councils, every stakeholder has to submit an application every election year. So even if a stakeholder has voted in that neighborhood council for 10 plus years, every election they're required to submit an application. The reason for that is because eligibility may change. Maybe their stakeholder status has changed and they might be eligible for a different ballot. So we want to assure that we're meeting the requirements of the bylaws and also providing the proper ballots to each stakeholder. So once an application is submitted, our staff will review that application, verifying eligibility based off the bylaws. And then we'll also be, if it's documentation, we'll assure that there's documentation attached. Or if it's self-affirmation, we're just making sure that the address qualifies them and for which ballots. Next, a ballot packet will be mailed to the voter. Ballot packets include the ballot or ballots if the stakeholder is eligible to receive multiple. Instructions. Instructions will be in English and then Spanish as well. And we will include a prepaid return envelope with that ballot. So next, stakeholder votes. That one's pretty self-explanatory. And then the last step is ballots are returned. So there's 3 different ways that ballots can be returned. They can be returned using USPS. They can be returned using the neighborhood council ballot boxes. I'll show you where those are going to be shortly. And they can also always be returned to our office as well. One thing I do want to highlight is all of these areas where there's an asterisk, voters will receive email notifications. So when they submit an application, they'll receive an email. Once we've verified their eligibility, they'll receive an email. They'll also receive an email when that ballot packet is mailed. This way they can kind of gauge, let's say they received that email 2 weeks ago and they haven't received their ballot. they can always contact our office so we can send a new ballot. And then there's also an email once we've received their ballot. So once we scan it in our office, an email is automatically sent so that the stakeholder is aware that we have received their ballot and it will be included in the tally. So next, I want to go over voter verification. Their neighborhood councils have two options when it comes to voter verification. There's self-affirmation and documentation. This is covered in Article 10 of the Neighborhood Council bylaws. And again, there's three things that we're looking for when it comes to voter verification. So the first one is going to be identity. So with self-affirmation, they're providing voter information on the application. When it comes to documentation, that's when we would require a photo ID. For example, a driver's license. So next is the age. We want to verify, again, to highlight youth seats. So we have to verify, can they receive the youth ballot or do they receive the general ballot? So if it's self-affirmation, they're providing their date of birth on the application. If it's documentation, they have to provide a document with their date of birth. For example, driver's license is the most common. And lastly, we need stakeholder status. So when it comes to self-affirmation, they're providing stakeholder status, address on the application. With documentation, some document that shows their stakeholder status. So let's say, for example, I have a driver's license, but it doesn't have my current address. I might pair that with a utility bill that's current, that shows that I am a current stakeholder within the neighborhood council. So that's when we talk about voter verification, those are the key differences. Just like candidate filing, when we talk about stakeholder registration options, there's two different ways. The first one is online registration, which is through the portal, which I'll show you shortly. This is a 51-day filing period. A benefit of filing through the portal is stakeholders are able to track their application and ballot status. So anytime they log in, they can see if their ballot's been mailed, if their application's been reviewed, if their ballot has been received. All of that, they can log in and see the status of their application. Next is the paper registration. This is an 81-day filing period. It's a little bit longer. This is a request from neighborhood councils who have asked to, whenever we have all vote by mail, to make those applications available earlier so that they can reach out to stakeholders and start to collect those. A benefit of a paper application is that you can designate an authorized agent to collect those applications. Let's say, for example, that a neighborhood council is having an event and they wanted it could be a voter information event. So they have a lot of the community come. They can have everyone fill out the registration form, and then they can designate an authorized agent to collect those forms and then send them to our office, just to make it kind of a little bit easier for stakeholders. That is an option with the paper application. So now let me go back and I can go through the voter forms. When it comes to the vote by mail application, it's very similar to the candidate one. It's a little bit simplified in the sense that voter information, so they just provide the neighborhood council, then they provide their first name, middle name, last name. They provide their birth year, phone number, and email. Again, is optional, highly recommended in case we have any questions. They also have the option to initial if they agree to receive neighborhood council information from Empower LA via text. Then we have the same qualifying address area. So we have it broken down into the 4 different stakeholder types. And it does say complete all that apply. This is very helpful, especially in those neighborhood councils where you can receive multiple ballots. So for example, maybe in this neighborhood council, because they live and have community interests, they might receive 2 different ballots based off those addresses, because maybe those are in different areas, or maybe there's a ballot for each stakeholder type. So that's why that's always helpful. They include a mailing address, excuse me, and then they sign under penalty of perjury. And then lastly, they have an area to designate an authorized agent. So for example, maybe in this case, I'm walking around to all my neighbors, trying to hand them registration forms and collecting them for them to send them to our office. So that's the paper application. It's pretty simple. And so when it comes to the candidate filing portal, it's going to be the same portal, same login. So you just hit login, click on voter now, and then you create a voter application. The voter application is broken down into 2 different, well, it's 2 or 3 different steps. I'll show that in just a moment. But the first step is just going to be the voter information. So when it comes to voter information, it's going to pull that first name and last name from the registration. This is editable just like the last time. So let's say that I'd like to use that as my first name for the voter. You can edit that, include date of birth, just like on the candidate form. Maybe I'm not comfortable including my full birth date. So you can include 0101 and then the year. You can choose if you'd prefer to be contacted email or phone. It's up to you. And then the email is pulled from the registration, and then phone number can be added, but it's optional. Highly recommended, like I mentioned. And then they can click here to receive neighborhood council information from Empower LA via text. That is optional. So like, for example, I can leave it unclicked. And so step 2 is going to be just the election information. So they select the neighborhood council. Let's say that I chose Mar Vista. That's when a 3rd step is going to come in, is when it's a documentation required neighborhood council. If it's self-affirmation, it will stay 2 steps. So like, for example, I'll choose Zapata King. It will be 2 steps because it's a self-affirmation neighborhood council. And so below that, it's the stakeholder types. We select check all that apply. So every time that someone checks, when you check that, a box shows up. So like, let's say that I choose I live and work. So a box shows up for me to provide my residence address and then my work address. But I'll unclick, and then you just unclick, and then you only have to provide one. If you click all 4, there'll be an area to provide an email for all 4 of those locations. So next, for residence address, I'll input, let's see. You just put in an address. Once you put in that address, you can hit verify address. And then once it does that, the address pops up just like with candidates. So it's showing the green triangle. The address is within the boundaries. Let's say that it's across the street. And it would show that we would check in our office we'd verify that address through once we review the application, but it's not going to stop the stakeholder from submitting their application. So I'll just hit close. Let me just copy that. So I've included the qualifying address. And then now I can include my mailing address. This does have to be typed in twice because it's checking two different systems. So this is checking the neighborhood council system in the portal to verify which has the neighborhood council boundaries. And then this is going through USPS to verify that this address is that we can deliver to this address. So they can click verify mailing address, or when they hit submit, that will automatically happen. Let me hit submit to show you. It's just like your standard delivery, like anytime you order online, you'll have a little pop-up to verify the USPS mailing address. This usually pops up because these last 4 digits are added to the zip code. So you can hit no, use the address I provided, or you can hit yes. So we'll just hit yes. Then you agree to penalty of perjury, hit submit, and the voter application has been submitted. One thing I do want to highlight while I change is that legal status does not affect being a candidate or voter. That's not required for either of those. Legal status is not required to vote in a neighborhood council or be a candidate in a neighborhood council. So we went through the vote by mail process. So now I want to go over some important vote by mail dates for Region 9. The first one is going to be vote by mail application period opens Friday, January 31st. Ballot mailing will begin Tuesday, February 25th. The vote by mail application period ends Sunday, March 23rd. The deadline to request resend ballots is Tuesday, March 25th. And election day is Tuesday, April 1st. Deadline to receive postmarked ballots is Friday, April 11th. So all ballots that we receive must be postmarked by election day and received at 10-day, at least, well, no more than 10 days after election day, which would be Friday, April 11th. So as long as, let's say someone on Monday prior to election day gets their ballot in the mail, and then we receive it Friday, April 11th, it will be included in the tally. I did want to talk about returning ballots briefly. So for Region 9, again, election day is April 1st, 2025. So that's the deadline to have ballots postmarked or return them in these other ways. So the first one is going to be using USPS, and voters can use the postage paid return envelope that's included in the ballot packet. We also are partnering with library and recreation and park locations. So every region will have multiple locations, library and recreation and park locations, where we will have candidate applications, vote by mail applications, along with ballot boxes available for stakeholders. And also ballots can be returned to our office. Excuse me. So I wanted to highlight the recreation and park and library locations in Region 9. So these are the locations where we'll have candidate filing applications, vote by mail applications, and ballot boxes available at these 6 locations throughout Region 9. So then lastly, I wanted to talk about election administrators. So our office, we have 4 election administrators. Uh, and so these election administrators are assigned to specific neighborhood councils. So these are the election administrators for Region 9. They will be emailing you pretty frequently. You'll receive an email when candidate filing opens, along with throughout the candidate filing period, you'll receive updates on candidate filing information, such as how many people have been certified, how many applications have been submitted, just contact information and links to provide multiple different resources to stakeholders. And feel free to reach out to your election administrator should you have any questions. Our office is really here to help you through the process, and including if a neighborhood council is having an event, we'd be happy to partner and maybe be there to help candidates and stakeholders through the process, and including voters. So with that, I will hand it over to Mary Lou.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for that presentation. And I think just to continue on that note, we're really here to support the engagement that you all do, not only year round, especially during the upcoming neighborhood council election cycle. So I prepared a brief presentation that's really kind of the tail end and really a great partner presentation to a previous presentation that our department did back on September 30th. So for many who may not know me, I'm the Director of Awareness of Engagement for our department, Empower LA, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, Marilu Guevara. I invite you to stay in contact with me. I'll have my contact information at the end. I do a lot of one-on-ones. I go out to outreach committees. I go out to events. I help staff events. So I'm here to support you and help you in any way possible. So tonight I'll be talking about how to do some planning for engagement throughout this election cycle. There are a couple of QR codes. So if you have your phone, feel free to scan them. If you don't worry about it. This presentation is on our website, and we'll make sure to get it to you. I will be sending out an email the day that your candidate filing opens, which for your region will be almost a week from today. So don't worry, I'll be attaching this presentation along with all the documents that go with it, so you'll have it handy. So for those of you that joined us on September 30th for our town hall, which is linked on our Empower LA website, and that you can see it under our workshops page. Our vision that essentially guides us during this neighborhood council election season is really to increase visibility of the neighborhood council system, increase the success of the neighborhood council elections, which inherently translates to a greater number of candidates, voters, and obviously to bring awareness to the work that you're all doing, and to really heighten the power of your volunteerism in the communities. So with that, we've created a framework for engagement. I won't get too into it. I'll just highlight a couple pieces of our framework. Once again, if you look back at our September 30th town hall, we took a deep dive into our engagement plan this election season. But really, we've identified a couple of campaign objectives for a citywide outreach plan that really takes into account the changing demographics around the city, the needs of the different regions throughout the city, and really the feedback that neighborhood councils have provided the department and really me during a lot of the one-on-ones that I've had. And this plan is really flexible. So even in the coming weeks, or if you meet with me and you relay that there's some needs in your community, our department, can always provide some resources, and be able to tailor some of this plan to your needs. So with that said, um, our focus is on creating messaging and communication engagement tools. What this means is working with trusted partners in the community, um, working with using our tools such as newsletters in the department, our social media platforms, to share messaging that neighborhood councils exist, their roles, who, what, when, what, kind of the basics of neighborhood councils, and then also introduce what neighborhood council elections are and the timeline, and share all the information that Michael just essentially shared with us with the community. So create some engagement around that messaging. With that comes working with partners in the community, that'd be city partners or city departments, including the mayor's office. We have a trusted partner in the office of the city clerk in this election, but also community partners. That'd be the CBOs that are in the community, homeowners associations, block clubs, any kind of messengers that are in the community, that faith-based organizations that we can lean in, who have a built-in audience, who have programs and services that we can provide, ready to go communication, and they can go ahead and share it on our behalf. Candidate and voter engagement. As you all know, throughout the election cycle, once someone becomes a candidate, they become the best messenger to bring voters out to vote, right? They do the get out the vote campaigns, voters themselves. So engaging them throughout all the stages of the election cycle is key, and we'll be doing a lot of work. Our plan includes a couple of sessions, some in-person, some virtual, to make sure that we engage not only candidates, but also voters throughout the process. And also including support for neighborhood councils. So that's you. With ready to go templates. So that's graphics, flyers, copy. So that's, content, text for you to use for your websites, your social media, your newsletters, for you to share with friends, for you to have for your events. So all that information will be ready to go. So on candidate filing day, so that's on next Friday, for Region 9, be ready, because a lot of that information will come via that first email that we send Friday. It will be attached and linked in that email. A lot of the templates will be linked and ready for you to download so that you can start using right away. And obviously advertisement. A lot of it is paid advertisement. We're leaning into some radio, some micro newspapers, advertisement that helps us promote and kind of take that message farther, than kind of our traditional messaging outlet would. So those are some of the kind of pillars of our framework that we're using this election cycle. So with that said, kind of pivoting to how you, members of neighborhood councils, can support and kind of complement the engagement that us as a department is doing. The next couple of slides will just kind of cover a series of activities and recommended framework for neighborhood councils, series of ideas that you all can partake in order to heighten some of the awareness, and to increase the impact for your own neighborhood councils during this election cycle. Partly it includes identifying key community partners, developing awareness through messaging, determining engagement and awareness methods, and, and utilizing education tools about the neighborhood council election to hopefully increase your impact and bring people to your meetings and further capacity in your neighborhood council. So the first thing is, obviously, is identifying key local partners. Us at the department level and at the city level are doing the same thing. As I just mentioned, we are looking at what relationships we have cultivated. We're cultivating new relationships. We're looking at existing relationships. We're leveraging communication, community outreach, technology, and information sharing. We're looking at community-based organizations that can help us play a role in engagement, education, and outreach efforts during this election cycle. We recommend that you as neighborhood councils, and we know that you are all volunteers, so obviously you can't do this citywide, but within your neighborhoods, and within your role in the neighborhood council system, recommend that you start creating a list of CBOs in your neighborhood, in your service area that you've worked with in the past and that you've developed a relationship with. These can include past NPG applicants, nonprofits that you've worked with, homeowner associations, block clubs, chambers of commerce, local businesses. The key goal in this is that through this list, you can start creating a newsletter list, perhaps maybe start following them on social media or invite them to follow your neighborhood council social media site. You can email them about your upcoming election, share with them deadlines, share with them candidate filing dates, vote by mail dates. You can invite them to be an outreach partner with you, share with them upcoming events, essentially create some awareness and increase the impact, which leads us to developing awareness through messaging. As I mentioned before, our department will be providing messaging and campaign material for all stages of the election. Neighborhood councils should prepare their communication platforms that includes your website, your social media, your newsletter, and be prepared for in-person events to share some of this messaging. Some of the messaging includes how and when to file and become a candidate, who can run, the notice of the beginning and the ending of the filing period, how to vote, who can vote, how to get your ballot, how to return a ballot, see who's running for your neighborhood council, vote by mail application period ends, the ballot box finder that Michael shared with us, why voting matters, and obviously post-election results. And obviously inviting them to come to your neighborhood council board meeting once the election concludes. So all this messaging is key. And obviously, if you've built that list and if you have a built-in following, and if you've prepared your website, you can definitely be ready to have to apply that template language and host it on your website. We've also created a handy guide, and there's a QR code there. But as I stated, I'll be sending that guide along with the email on Friday, on candidate filing opening day Friday. This guide, it will include engagement and awareness methods for neighborhood councils. It will include a range of activities that neighborhood councils can implement to reach stakeholders, particularly those who've never attended a neighborhood council meeting or voted in any election. Creating opportunities for direct contact, engagement facilitated by partnerships, and using communication platforms as much as possible to expand the neighborhood council's long-term reach. So I'll highlight a couple of these methods, but the guide will include much more. The guide speaks of creating an awareness and engagement and awareness program that includes engaging board committee members, your partner organizations, to receive resources that they can share with professional, friend, and community networks. It's really about cultivating and kind of thinking through and really building in, kind of a second nature of telling people about the work that you do. I can tell you that I work with I work with neighborhood council leaders and I hear about all the great work that you all do. But it's second, I think we all are used to the work that you do, that we forget sometimes to share it out to people who don't know about the neighborhood council system. So, if you have friends, if you have family members, if you have neighbors, ask them if they know about the neighborhood council system. Do they know that you belong to the neighborhood council system? Do they know that you're going to a meeting once a month or that you're part of committees? Invite them to the meeting with you. Tell them about the work. Tell them about an upcoming, CIS that's coming up. I think that goes a long way. It introduces the concept to individuals so that by the time that elections come around, the concept of neighborhood councils is not a foreign concept. Um, Second, election information on your websites. During election time, it's key that if somebody visits your website, they should know that your neighborhood council is having an election. You should have important deadlines, links to voter registration, links to a candidate application, and any other kind of important material regarding the elections on your website. You can use some of the same links that you can find on the City Clerk's website, our website, the empowerla.org website. The important thing is that you want to help promote your own election, and your website is key. If you have a website and you are in the middle of a neighborhood council election, people should know that you're having an election when they visit your website. That's key. Community and neighborhood council events. If you do any tabling, any canvassing during your neighborhood council election cycle, you should be promoting the deadlines that Michael just shared, whether it be candidate filing, whether it be the voter application, whether it just be returning a ballot, getting out the vote. Um, if you need any staffing support, if you have any upcoming events, and you need volunteers, if you need staffing, contact me. Our staff in our department is always willing to support events, especially for outreach, especially during the election cycle. Social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, also known as X, Nextdoor, and other online social neighborhood council platforms to promote and distribute election information are key. Additionally, providing and working with community-based organizations to share materials and messages to their networks is key. So that list of key partners, follow them online. If you follow them, they will see your material when you share it. If they follow you back, they'll definitely see it. Share it with them so that they can share it within their own social media accounts. As you know, not everybody's online, but social media is just key to kind of to reaching the most number of people. Voter engagement presentations, reaching out to community-based organizations to schedule presentations with the assistance of our department. You can appoint a neighborhood council speaker who can share about their positive experience and do a presentation. We do this all the time. We work with a lot of neighborhood councils to do this. Having a speaker, somebody who's ready to go for your neighborhood council, who can share about their experience, their work, contacting a local organization who maybe has a membership meeting or a program meeting, seeing if they could maybe place you on the agenda to talk about neighborhood councils, to talk about an upcoming meeting, to just invite members to attend your upcoming board meeting, to talk about the importance of the work that you do. we can definitely help you with that if you want to put together a PowerPoint. We have a PowerPoint template, so voter engagement presentations are really key to kind of engaging partners in the community. Advertisement, utilizing at cost or no cost messaging throughout the neighborhood council service area, like public service announcements, ads, and articles in local publications, micro newspapers. A lot of our communities still have micro newspapers. Some of those ads are, low cost, have cult following sometimes by a lot of readers. So they can be great investments, long-term investments for multiple months. You can publicize your meetings. You can have online ads on social media platforms. And obviously, if you have any college campuses or any universities within your service areas, I'll even, expand that. If you have any high schools, if you have a youth seat that's open, for to anyone 14 to 17 years old, and you have a high school in your neighborhood council, you should also consider reaching out to dropping by and talking to the school principal, introducing yourself, letting them know that there's a neighborhood council in the area where you meet, seeing if there's an opportunity for you to kind of schedule a meeting maybe with the governor, I'm sorry, not the governor, the government teacher, and see if there's an opportunity for you to do a presentation to the class on the importance of neighborhood councils. Um, and with that said, those are just a brief overview of some of the ways that you can help, and we can work together to get awareness out regarding neighborhood council elections and regarding your work. I'm always available for meetings and to highlight the work that you do. Um, that's my email. Obviously, if you go on our website, you can also find my contact information. I'm also available for any questions that there might be. And I think that's it for now. Let me stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary Lou. So now we'll kind of open it up to if there's any questions. I did want to cover one topic, which is when it goes to the neighborhood council portal. So every voter and candidate needs a login. So as I kind of mentioned, when it comes to a candidate, or it's going to be more common with voters, but let's say that you're a candidate and you want your whole family to sign up. All of them, if they want to submit a application through the portal, they will all need to create a login and log in and submit their application that way. If you want to just have them fill out a paper application, you can be the authorized agent and send it in. But it will require a unique login when it comes to the neighborhood council portal. Then for voices, voices is kind of a unique situation, because voices is typically let me just make sure before yes. Voices is usually self-affirmation, but within their bylaws, it states that if it's all vote by mail, that they require documentation. We are waiting to verify that with the neighborhood council, but that is what the bylaws state. So hope that answers that question. Are there any other questions? I know that there were a few comments because the QR code was there were a few issues with the QR code, but don't worry, we'll be emailing all the links out to the plan and stuff like that. And then there's the question, will this presentation be available online? So my goal is I just have to work with our staff because we're recording all of these presentations, and I would like to make them available so that you can share them with stakeholders, so that you can log into our website and just see all of these different presentations because we're doing one for each region. So That is the goal, to make them all available online. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out um, to myself, but our goal will be to have the slides available along with the presentation, and we'll include Mayor Lou's presentation as well. Let's see, so then can I repeat the process for authorized person, oh, for registration? Yeah, so when it comes to, I'm assuming this is the authorized agent for vote by mail. So all that has to happen is the vote by mail form will be filled out from the voter. And then at the bottom of the application, there's an area for the authorized agent to be assigned. So it prints out the authorized agent's name and then a signature for the authorized agent. So let's say, again, I'll just use that same example of I'm a board member, and let's say I live in an apartment complex. I can walk around to all of the different apartments to hand out the application, collect them, just designate that I'm the authorized agent. So then when I collect all of them, I can just send them to our office so that we can process the application. Hopefully that. So then there's the question, in the past, neighborhood councils had election committee to spearhead this work. Is that the case? Or can all board members, including board members who are running for re-election, participate in the process? I think Mayor Lou's probably going to be best. I would say from our office that if someone is a candidate, it's not always ideal, but let's say that it's one of those neighborhood councils where every seat's up for election. That's not an option. You can definitely be on the election committee, but Mayor Lou, I'll hand that off to Mayor Lou to answer that more completely.
Yeah, you're right, Michael. I think for some neighborhood councils, many of you, your entire neighborhood council, all your seats are up for election. So you don't have, the luxury of having board members be part of an election committee that are not, whose seats are not up for election. So to answer your question, yes, I mean, a person holding a seat that is part of the 2025 election cycle can be part of an outreach committee or elections committee. However, um, it is recommended that they always keep their neighborhood empowerment advocate engaged, so their NEA engaged about the participation in the committee so that the NEA is aware, and that secondly, and this is probably even more important, that they keep their role in the committee separate from their role as a candidate. So in other words, if the committee is planning a get out the vote event, right? Where they're going to put together an event at the park, for example. The planning needs to be nonpartisan. It needs to not promote any candidates. It needs to only focus on promoting deadlines, promoting the fact that that the neighborhood council is having an election, supplying everyone with applications. So in other words, it should not be promoting any candidacies. It should not elevate any candidates. The committee should not also provide any resources to any candidates. Neither should a neighborhood council. Candidates should also not use their role on the neighborhood council or the fact that they're on the planning committee to their advantage during their campaign to run for a seat. So if there are any questions, they can always reach out to our department. and we can definitely provide some guidance. But to answer your question, yes, somebody who is running as a candidate can participate in a committee to, increase awareness on the election, and plan activities on, related to the election.
Yeah, great. I think and that's another thing from our office as well. It's definitely possible. It's just always to make it clear that your candidacy, like in your campaign, is separate from the NCs. But there's always times where things have to cross over. And then I saw that question from Giovanni with voices. Just have so there's my email along with Naima, who is the election administrator, and if you could just have the president, ideally, probably just email either of us or both of us, that would be great, and we can clarify that real quick. I think an email went out as well. And then I see the question, have there been many times where certified candidates are challenged, and how long does it take to get a resolution? It really varies every election season. There can be a lot of candidate challenges. Typically, those are related to term limits, and we've kind of changed the way that we're doing the system. So when I went over the paper application and the portal, the reason that we have that question, if you're a current sitting board member, is so that we're able to take a look before we certify a candidate and understand when that person was became a board member, so that we can just check the term limits there. So that was the most common candidate challenge that we received. We do receive others, maybe there's questions about a candidate's stakeholder status, because what on the candidate website, it lists the candidate, the ballot name, the pronouns, the candidate statement, and then it will have the documentation used to verify. And what I mean is just the title. So it's like if you use driver's license, it will just say California driver's license. So if it's a work, let's say that it was a seat where you have to work, but it only said driver's license, that could trigger a challenge. And we would have to look on our side to say, did we see something? And maybe we did, but we didn't list it, so we can go in and edit it. But usually candidate challenges are resolved pretty quickly. Honestly, I would say within a day or two, typically. So they're pretty fast to resolve those candidate challenges. So any other questions? Let's see. Let's see. So term limit, it's going to be a little tricky. It's going to be based off the bylaws again. Some boards, all terms are 2 years, which would mean that the whole board is up for election every election season, because neighborhood council elections take place on odd number of years. Some boards have staggered seats where they can have 4-year terms. And so some neighborhood councils have no term limits. So someone could be on that board from the time it was established to now. Some neighborhood councils might have a 3-year or a 3-term limit. So after 3 consecutive terms, there has to be a break before that person can be a candidate again. It's really going to be based off Article 5 in the bylaws. All right. Thank you, David, for attending. All right. Are there any other questions? All right. I think we don't have any more questions. I just want to again thank everybody for attending. Thank you, Mayor Lou and Paola, for being here to help participate and help out with this this group. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. I know I said it, but I just want to, reiterate, all of us are here to help you with this process. And, just be in contact with your EA, myself, Mary Lou. We're happy to help and assist you through. So thank you, everybody, and I hope everyone has a great election season.